responsible for marketing and BD at Meridian West, and I've got with me my colleague Ben Kent, who's founder and partner of Meridian West, and Bertie Heppel, who's a senior consultant or director even. And we've all been involved in looking at the climb results, and we're going to share with you some high-level insights of the study that we've conducted recently. And I'm going to start off with just giving you a bit of introductions, and then I'll hand over to Ben, who will talk a bit more about some detailed findings. And Bertie has recently compiled the more in-depth analysis of the aggregate results, and he will then give some more conclusions on the findings. I think I'm sharing my screen here so you can see our cover page. Ben, Bertie, let me know if that's not the case.
Looks good to me.
So as I said, we'll be sharing the high-level results from our recent client listening maturity study, where we asked firms to provide details of their client listening practices. And in return, they received a detailed benchmark report, allowing them to compare their own practices against relevant peer groups that we defined together using sector, turnover, and maturity information. A more comprehensive report, as I just mentioned, with aggregate analysis was sent out to participants last week. So if you would like to receive this report, you'll have to take part in the climb study. And we'll provide you with details on how to do that later on. So just by way of explanation, we asked firms to provide details on 4 different aspects of their client listening. First, the research, so the different channels firms use to listen to their clients, like in-depth interviews, online surveys, structured telephone interviews, focus groups, or other methods. And we also wanted to know about the analytical techniques that people use to analyze this data. So whether, they use regression or other models to look at the data, whether they have technology in place like survey software or dashboards or emerging AI solutions to help them cope with the scale of insights and to avoid creating silos. Then the integration section looked at how the insights are being used across the firm. And finally, we wanted to know about all the important impacts that client listening program has on supporting the firm's strategic objectives and the commercial goals, because obviously there has to be a point in investing in these programs. So over the past 2.5 months, we have received responses from over 85 different firms. So firms participating included all of the big 4 consultancies, as they're known, a large number of law firms, including Magic Circle firms, some global, some mid-sized firms, a few consultancies and property firms as well. And you can see here the turnover breakdown of participants yourself. We have the ability in the dashboard to filter by the different turnover bands and sector to provide more detailed or more relevant benchmarks to the firms that we're showing the results to. But for this purpose, we're just going to be looking at the aggregate results themselves. And we have kind of identified 3 different stages of maturity that firms usually go through on their journey to full advanced maturity in client listening. And we also conducted some in-depth interviews as part of the research with program owners and found there are some similarities in the firms, but there are also noticeable exceptions to this as well. So all firms seem to be different and at different levels of their maturity journey. So stage 1 is usually about getting started with kind of receptive partners, piloting early interviews, usually in the form of relationship reviews, sharing some initial feedback, and slowly rolling this approach out to cover more sectors or practice areas and communicating successes to the wider firm. And then in stage 2, typically they're adding additional listening channels and acquire some technology to help them cope with the increase in volume. And they focus on the follow-up processes and also on the aggregate results, as well as individual follow-ups, and allowing the firm to identify potentially systemic issues and start thinking about also optimizing the client journey. So really making use of the insights. But then in the advanced stage, firms are really embedding client insights into the business processes, like account reviews, pitches, as well as using them for marketing, thought leadership, planning events, etc., etc. And often they appoint also client champions throughout the firm at various seniority levels, just to help with collecting and communicating the insights across the firm. And advanced firms also enhance the feedback data with data from CRM and financial systems, which provides deeper insights for analysis. And feedback is also linked to client journey maps to identify remaining pain points or training needs. And we found that especially in the advanced stage firms, all of them have invested a lot in their client journey mapping processes. Just to look at the next slide on the segmentation side. So we basically split all participants into 3 different segments. So we have the foundational ones, the intermediate and advanced groups. And as you can see, the majority of firms were in the intermediate stage, with only a small percentage having progressed to the advanced category. And I must add that there isn't really a clear picture that large firms are better than smaller firms, and some mid-sized firms are very mature in using client listening to drive their growth strategy. But generally speaking, we would say accountancies and property firms are usually better at listening to clients than law firms, as a kind of general rule. I want to share some headline results, and we're going to dive deeper into this. So before I hand over to Ben, I just wanted to share some of these findings, which I hope you found interesting. So a good client listening program really drives growth. So firms in the advanced category show higher growth rates than those in the foundational category. This is like 7% versus 1% of those in the foundational category, which is quite a significant finding and provides good numbers for a business case to invest in client listening, of course. The most successful firms also use a blended approach, so mixing in-depth interviews and online surveys at relevant touch points. This provides them with both the deep insights and client understanding, as well as the volume data that's needed to track KPIs and identify trends. So many firms are conducting in-depth interviews in-house as well. And of course, client listening is not about checking up on whether partners have done a good job. It's more about developing a deeper client understanding. And that includes their future needs and challenges. And therefore, we're seeing a real shift from kind of backward-looking questions to more proactive, forward-looking topics. And, obviously, if you use the image of driving a car, you don't want to keep looking in the rear mirror, what happened before, but you really need that outlook and that foresight to evolve with your client needs. So all firms in the advanced category have invested in technology as well. So dynamic dashboards able to cope with multiple data sources, and are increasingly adopting intelligent AI solutions as well. And this helps having the insights at your fingertips and has transformed many client teams into providers of valuable business intelligence as well. But still, many firms are also missing out on the insights that can be derived from data analytics and are frankly undervaluing the benefits of analyzing aggregate data with techniques like segmentation or key driver analysis. And these techniques can really help to identify low-hanging fruits, identifying buyer profiles, and even predict future spend based on past data. So buy-in from senior leadership has to be more than just lip service, and we hear that a lot, that people have buy-in, but really when it comes to bringing clients forward for interviews, there's a reluctance often, and it's more seen as part of a compliance tick box exercise. So visionary leaders that can be found in the advanced category firms, they really understand the importance of deeper client insights and play an important part in ensuring that the whole firm understands their contribution to successful client relationships. So finally, there's also a need to refresh these programs or they will become stale. This applies to all maturity stages and means that all firms need to regularly evolve their client listening programs, scaling up, taking advantage of new technology, refreshing content. These are all part of a continuous evolution. So when we presented the slides, the results to individual firms, we compared their own data with that of their peer group as defined through sector, turnover, and so on. And as you can see, here's an example of a quite a mature company with a high response of 81, a high score of 81. And you can see how they fared across the 5 dimensions compared to the peer group, who's doing considerably worse. So this is just to show you an example of how we present the individual results. And yeah, with this fun thought, I thought I'd hand over to Ben to carry on.
Fantastic, Alex. So what we're going to look at first of all is, what sort of research approaches are firms using? And I must say, I think this is a kind of cause for kind of celebration. Actually, is it's just people are using a kind of blend of different techniques. And I've been doing client feedback for professional services firms for it must be over 25 years. And I think, traditionally firms were very comfortable with doing in-depth interviews with their key clients. But what we're seeing here is actually they're blending that with online surveys, structured telephone interviews. And I think what we're also seeing is firms thinking a bit more laterally as well. So also thinking about how they can incorporate into their analysis the kind of informal conversations that they're having with clients. So, how do we capture conversations that partners have with clients over lunch, get that into the dashboard? And another great source is interviews with people who've just come back from secondment. So I think a kind of growing sophistication here. I think one area which is still a bit of a struggle is just getting the numbers of interviews up. I think online really makes that much more cost effective, but I think most firms are still doing not enough interviews. And I think scale really matters here because it really enables you to slice and dice the data, look at particular practice areas, particular segments of clients. And it also means that professionals within firms have several clients giving feedback on the matters that they're engaged with. Let's move to the next slide. I think another area where we're seeing kind of significant progress is getting feedback at different touch points. So what this shows that 83% are getting feedback as a kind of wider relationship view, often with the main decision maker, but that's been supplemented with post-pitch and post-matter feedback as well. We're also seeing a kind of growing minority that are looking at getting feedback when new clients have been onboarded. And a few actually that are still doing it kind of mid-matter so that they can correct course if needed. So these are kind of a kind of good progress in terms of research techniques. Now let's look at technology, which is the next slide. So a kind of more mixed picture here, I think. So we're seeing good progress in terms of the adoption of dashboards. So there's a variety of dashboards which are now available. And I must say, I think they're pretty much fundamental in terms of a kind of serious client feedback program. They they're relatively inexpensive, and they can really automate the analysis both of online quantitative research, but also they're becoming much more sophisticated in terms of analyzing qual as well. What they also do is enable you to drill into the data in a much easier way and really pick out those nuggets that might be lost if it's the data is just in an Excel spreadsheet. CRM and integration with CRM is the kind of nirvana. Still, many are struggling with that. We have big data protection issues and also issues about the CRM clunkiness of the technology and making the connections. But I think, what's interesting is that last one is the AI. So we're beginning to see that emerge with 17% said they're already using AI on text analysis. But I think this is set to transform this sector. So it's an area we've been doing a lot of work. We've been partnering with an AI firm. And what AI does is it enables you to analyze qualitative data and do theme analysis and create automated kind of executive summaries, which is kind of massively time saving and really helps you to extract the most value from the feedback. What it can also do is integrate different information sources. So it could be desk research, quant, qual, and linking up with CRM systems. So potentially really transformative. You create this kind of 360-degree view of the client, and you can identify opportunities. So I think it's very much kind of watch this space on the AI. So Bertie.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So yeah, Alex, if you want to go to the next page. We as part of this research, we also did a bit on a couple of kind of case study interviews, so we got some kind of more in-depth feedback, and we've got some more of this in the report, and some of you who have already seen that will recognize this, but this I think just illustrates that point around what technology means for scaling up programs, and really it's that kind of central facilitator of a kind of large program with kind of multiple touch points and lots of data coming in. This is a head of client program at a law firm who was kind of spoke about this is just getting too unwieldy. There was just too much to kind of manage in spreadsheets and Word documents. So that little bit of investment into a good, decent platform is really what kind of enables, I think, the next steps, which is what I'll kind of talk about here. That kind of moving away from we're just collecting information to what we're actually going to do with it. So Alex, if you want to move to the next slide, this kind of shows, I think, a really kind of key first point to that. So this is all kind of different analytical techniques, the majority of which I would say are really kind of enabled by having that kind of technology in place, the dashboard and the AI, the CRM integration. But I think the key point that I want to make here is that most organizations that we have surveyed aren't doing really any of this at the moment, kind of 30% or thereabouts, kind of looking at cluster analysis and client personas, things like that. Kind of much fewer doing any kind of key driver analysis or anything like that. But at the same time, very few are kind of ruling it out. It's a kind of an active consideration for a lot of the people in our survey. So this is really something that's kind of coming down the line. And I think the key point here is, and again, this is something that we go into in a bit more detail in the kind of long form report that we have, is that, the reason why this all matters is that we can tell that this very much kind of correlates with kind of good levels of success in client listening. Those people who completed our survey and said, yes, we're doing very well in, for example, boosting client service. The majority of those are the ones who are kind of implementing things like key driver analyses to help them work out which variables are actually the ones that are having a good impact on client service to begin with. So I won't go into detail against each and every one of these kind of different techniques, because I know we're short on time here, but each one of these in some way kind of correlates with either better kind of high levels of kind of client service, or a firm being better at kind of spotting future opportunities, or both, or something else, some other kind of success point. Do you want to go to the next one, Alex? Another thing that I think is key to kind of bringing client listening away from kind of a story of kind of ongoing kind of action and data collection to actually embedding kind of cultural change in an organization is what you actually do with it towards the end. So you have all this kind of analysis, but what does that actually, how is that actually kind of embedded further into the firm? And we've got a couple of kind of metrics here as to that show different things that different organizations are doing to ensure this. And I think that's kind of quite a kind of interesting, kind of mixed levels, I suppose, of kind of interest or kind of rollout along these things. Though the things that I think the majority are already doing. So as an example of this, I've got that kind of bottom bar there. 63% are already in some way kind of integrating client feedback findings into their key account plans. I think, to be honest, it's if there's a surprise there, I think it's that it's not kind of higher than 63%. But then there are things that are less common, and there are things that a smaller kind of number of firms are doing to ensure that they're kind of embedding the results of their client feedback into kind of long-term strategy or the way that their kind of organization works. So, for example, embedding it into the kind of reward or bonus kind of structure, that's kind of sitting at 21%. Very few with any kind of plans to do this, but also kind of integrating into the firm's kind of financial or profitability data. I think this is something that we'll see grow quite considerably over the next kind of 2 years. We've got about half of the respondents in our kind of peer set saying that they would like to start doing this in the next 2 years. So, again, I think evidence of a bit of what kind of Ben and Alex were talking about earlier with regards to shifting focus away from the past and just looking at kind of performance and more thinking about the kind of commercial opportunities to come out of client listening. Just one last point on this slide before I move us on. I think there's a kind of surprising in a way kind of lack of engagement, I think, with the kind of executive committee amongst our respondents. So those kind of 2 bars at the top. The top one is, the firms that have a designated member of their kind of leadership team who are responsible for client experience. Only 51% saying that they have that at the moment, and only 60% saying that they actually track or report kind of client service KPIs at that kind of executive committee level. These 2 things I think are particularly crucial, and we can see this both in the kind of correlation that this has with some of those kind of success measurements that I spoke about earlier, but also just kind of anecdotally, we've heard a lot about this, haven't we, Ben?
Exactly. So I think successful programs, both you need a managing partner or someone on the board really driving it, but I think as important is the kind of in the middle of the firm where the power resides. It's the office heads, the service line heads, and I think this is something that the Big Four tend to do very well. Actually, is they devolve responsibility for driving client centricity down to the tax function, say, and they hold partners accountable for both collecting the data and acting on it. And I think and they will often set KPIs to ensure that happens. So and it'll be part of their kind of bonus, and I think that's really where you begin to get traction, is when it becomes part of their appraisal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had a whole meeting with a couple of our clients a few weeks ago, Ben and I, where we were discussing the kind of carrot versus the stick approach. And I think if that kind of top down is a bit more of a stick approach, I think it definitely has its place and has its value. And it's surprising that we're not seeing kind of more doing that.
Exactly, and I think the other thing is kind of on the carrot side, I think it's kind of reframing the feedback in a way that's not seen as compliance. So we've done a number of sort of case studies which we're beginning to publish now, but I think Mills and Reeve do this really well. They have this kind of framework of fearless feedback. So this won't be used to kind of beat you up. It's really about kind of curiosity and understanding those future opportunities. And I think that framing of the client feedback as being helpful to fee earners is absolutely critical. And then also being really creative about how you kind of communicate the findings so they become, you don't lose people's interest. I think is absolutely critical.
Yeah. I'm conscious of time, so let's go on to some of the limitations. I think this is some of the most interesting data that we collected, is around what's actually holding people back from kind of success in their client listening, and really what we found was there's this kind of big issue first and foremost around opacity, which is that the big 57% bar on the far left hand side. The most kind of impactful thing is just the difficulty of checking whether fee earners are actually following up on the actions that are arising from the feedback. So this was interestingly, I think, an issue across all firms, but especially the larger firms, some of the Big Four, I think, and the larger law firms in particular, kind of multinationals really did feel this in particular. Aside from that, what we found was actually these kind of limitations and difficulties really did depends on kind of which stage in the client listening process you're actually at. So we saw that those kind of enough kind of foundational group, those just kind of starting out, really had issues around kind of stakeholder buy-in. They were struggling with stakeholders being reluctant to put clients forward to review, or seeing it as that kind of tick box exercise that Ben was talking about. But once you kind of get over that hurdle and get to the kind of intermediate stage, it was much more kind of God, we suddenly managed to collect all these kind of interviews. We've got too many transcripts. How do we actually sift through these? We're struggling with kind of manual, time-consuming processes, kind of integrating different data sources, things like that. And then only once you've kind of come over that, it's the advanced firms who, in particular, were really thinking about, okay, we've got the volume, we've got the analysis, but how do we actually kind of implement this and kind of bring it forwards and use it to change the culture? So we have more on this on the kind of in the report that I know some of you will have seen already. But there are three kind of distinct camps with distinct challenges and ways to resolve them, I suppose. Well, Alex, do you want to? So this is just one kind of example of one of the people that we spoke to around buying in particular, and that kind of early kind of stage of how do you actually bring people on board. This is a bit of what Ben and I were talking about just a moment ago. Getting buy-in from senior stakeholders, getting kind of advocacy is really, I think, the kind of primary objective in setting up a kind of a firm-wide, certainly client listening program. And what we've seen is that it's been a question of internal communications for those who have gone through it, kind of re-evaluating or kind of repurposing the kind of messaging around the client listening from being, this is something that we're potentially going to be using to punish fee owners or to look a bit deeper than they'd want to actually, no, we're looking at commercial opportunities. We're looking to find some kind of return on investment, and look, we've done this before and we can prove that it's happened. So that's kind of one example.
I think the other thing we've sort of seen work really well is shifting the emphasis of the interviews away from kind of backward looking, lots of questions around past satisfaction, lots of rating scales, and much more to the kind of the future opportunities for the firm. What are the challenges that the client's facing? What does that mean in terms of the support they have? Also focusing on how does it inform the strategy. So, looking at legal, technology solutions, legal tech, for example, diversity, the brand. So, and I think those sort of questions suddenly to drive the strategy of the firm, and people see the value and the commercial value immediately.
Yeah.
Did you want to go to the next step slide, or?
Just to reiterate. So I think just to sort of summarize what we're saying is, I think number one, client feedback is firmly established within the professions. It's proved its worth. All the firms that are doing it are getting value out of it. However, there is a kind of different levels of maturity. I would say that the 15% who are advanced are definitely getting a return from investment in it. So, they're able to use it to kind of drive growth. And they are growing faster than those that aren't using sophisticated techniques. They're using it to find those commercial opportunities. What's also happening is technology is bringing down the cost of delivering these and making it a much less manual process, much more agile, able to integrate different information sources. So I think kind of best practice is blending the different types of research techniques across the client journey, also feeding in kind of informal feedback, so you have one picture of the client. Shift towards forward-looking questions. Use technology. I think it's a no-brainer to be using dashboards, to be honest. They have huge benefits, but I would definitely be looking at AI, because I think that will transform this sector and quite quickly. We've been using it on our projects, and my goodness, it's really good. It's faster, it's cheaper, it's better and more objective. It really helps you find those nuggets. And I would also, call for people to kind of use data analysis. There's kind of, it really helps you find those nuggets. So I think that's our summary. Will we move on to next steps? So in terms of sort of next steps, I think if you haven't done the survey, please do. We will give you access to the full report, plus also your personal benchmark. Also look out for case studies of best practice. We've got quite a few, and we'll be releasing those on LinkedIn over the next few weeks. If you want to see the AI tool that we've developed that helps with analyzing data, just let us know. It's called Hub. We've also got a session coming up on client journey mapping, which we're doing with PSMG. And so, yeah, that's Wednesday, the 7th of February. So there's plenty of additional bits of insight coming down the line.
Great. And we're already overrunning. So thank you very much for your time. And we'll finish here and hope we'll speak to you at a future stage again. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.